All right, today I'm going to talk about my 5 favorite custom builds in the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. So these are custom classes, and I want to go over the details of what race to pick, what birth sign, specialization, attributes, major skills, and what the end game might look like. So first we have the Battle Mage, and I think this is objectively the strongest class in the game. The Battle Mage is going to be a Breton, because they start with 50% magic resistance and a bonus to magic as well. They're picking the magic specialization. You might be wondering, I understand why you pick endurance for an attribute, but strength is actually very difficult to raise in this build. I personally do not want to use blunt or hand-to-hand to efficiently level strength. You can watch those people in the arena for 5 hand-to-hand skill, and early game, I would probably be training block for endurance boosts. By the time I get to mid game and I get to 100 endurance, I'm going to be training restoration and destruction. So only my blade is going to be gaining me any strength attributes. So my strength is going to be kind of tedious to raise. And Bretons start with only 30 endurance and strength. So it just starts so low. It's going to take a lot of work to actually raise it up there. My major skills are going to be destruction, restoration, heavy armor, blade, and armorer. I highlighted these as green because these are the important ones, and they are the ones that I'm probably going to train up to 100 through gameplay by late game. Maybe not blade, it's not really required, but the other 4 for certain. These other 2, I actually chose them specifically for this build because they level up slowly and I won't get them to 100. I don't really want to get much higher than level 30. I think level 40 is a good cap. You don't really want to keep training your major skills after level 40 in Oblivion because your enemies will keep scaling, but you're not really gaining any more power. Mercantile and athletics work great because as major skills, they won't level too quickly, but you will have a minor speed boost from this athletics, and gold will be a little easier to handle with your boost from mercantile early game. Like I said, I'm training my block for my endurance boost early game, and then later game I'm going to transition into restoration and destruction, which will give me levels very quickly, but that's okay. Some end game items. Well, I'm going to use the Necromancer's Amulet. That gives me 158 magicka with 1 item. Now, if you don't use the unofficial Oblivion patch, this means you can't turn in the Necromancer's Amulet because you will never get it back. This comes from a Mage's Guild quest. The title of the quest is just the Necromancer's Amulet. If you use the unofficial patch, when you become Guild Leader of the Mage's Guild, it will be in your nightstand. So I use the patch so I can still finish it, but if you don't, just hold on to it. If you really do want to finish the Mage's Guild quest, you can switch it out for plus 50 magicka. Just know that then you will have obviously 108 less magicka. It is also nice because I don't really think that 25 endurance is making a big difference. Remember, that 25 endurance is just 50 health. You don't really need that on this character, and I'll explain why later. Next, we have the Mundane Ring. If you do that quest with Boris in the sewers, and you are over level 22, it is a guaranteed drop. The rest are going to be all plus 50 magicka, and it really doesn't matter what weapon you use. You can use a bow if you want. You can use a blade for that major skill. If you want to actually do damage, you can give it a good enchant. But really, with that much destruction, you're able to just obliterate all of your enemies. The endgame stats are you have 100% magic resist because of the Breton racial, and the Mundane Ring alone give you magic immunity. And this means nothing that does magic damage can hurt you, whether that's a trap or reflected spell. You're at the armor cap with 85% armor because you're wearing heavy armor and it's all Daedric or Madness. You have 808 magicka before you've casted any Fortify magicka effects from your high restoration skill. If you are interested in what this might look like, this Mage Showcase that I recorded, shows me annihilating enemies, and I'm able to complete this game on max difficulty with this build because I have such a high magicka pool, and I'm able to 2-shot enemies. I cast a weakness spell, and then I follow it up with a touch spell, and that weakness spell includes a paralyze, and it takes almost none of my magicka. This build, this character right here is without the Mundane Ring and is lacking a lot of those 50 magicka sigil stones, and it's still these spells that are one-shotting high-level enemies are barely affecting my magicka. So the strengths are that it's very easy to get your defenses up. It's unstoppable. I think it's the best build in the game, just objectively, and it doesn't actually require great gear. The Mundane Ring, the Necromancer's Amulet, these are guaranteed drops that will give you a lot more power, but you don't actually need them. The weakness is, if you really want to make it the most powerful it can possibly be, you aren't going to get 7 plus 15 magical sigil stones unless you're save scumming. If you've ever watched me play, sometimes when I do an Oblivion gate at the end, I will quick save, get the stone, check it out, quick load, and then keep getting new sigil stones until it says plus 50 magicka. I think that's kind of cheating. You might not. That's up to you whether or not you want to do it. if we actually want to look at the specific spells there, so that spell I was doing was 40 damage of each type for a duration of 2 seconds. If I have 100 skill, that is costing 102. That's what I was casting on that Mage Build Showcase, and you saw how little of my magicka it was taking. Because I had over 1,000 magicka with a couple hundred willpower, I restored that incredibly fast. The weakness spell I was casting only cost 59 magicka, and that's if I wanted to have 10-second durations on target. That follow-up, those 2 spells, will do 960 damage. So that's why you're seeing me crush everything with that Breton build. It's 960 damage in 2 spells, and it could be a lot higher if I was really pushing that build. Number 2, we have the Berserker. This is going to be an Orc with the Warrior Birth Sign for that high endurance. Combat specialization, we're going endurance and strength again. My major skills, the important ones are Blade, Heavy Armor, Restoration, Armorer, and Alchemy. Again, just like with my Battle Mage, Athletics and Mercantile are going to be my 2 that could be traded out. But if you do trade them out for something, make sure it's not something you plan on getting to 100 or that will level too quickly. I'm picking both of these for this build because they level slowly and they provide me a benefit. Blade could obviously be blunt. You don't have to be an Orc. In fact, I did a similar build to this on a Nord. I called the character Grandpa. It's very similar. However, he's got 25% less magicka resist, and I used blunt on that character. The Alchemy, if you're not careful with it, can cause your character to level too quickly, so don't just spam make potions like an insane person. Early game, whether you want strength or endurance first, you're going to train either blunt or block at a trainer. It will be cheap because that's a minor skill. You should be able to get strength and endurance both to 100 fairly quickly. After you do that, just train up restoration. You could train Blade if you wanted, but I don't think you'll really need that too quickly because it will go up fairly quick as a combat specialization and a major skill. Some endgame items, I think Necklace of Swords is great. Necklace of Swords provides reflect damage and will make you take a lot less damage. And if your blade didn't quite get to 100 yet, it will bring it to 100, so you don't need to use any Fortify skill. Next, of course, the Mundane Ring, because it's an automatic drop and it's perfect. And then I'm going to split the rest of my gear between either plus 50 Fatigue Sigil Stones or plus 50 Magicka Sigil Stones. And that's because the plus 50 Fortify Fatigue is going to increase my damage from my base physical attacks. The weapon I'm going to use is a Madness Claymore, and I'm going to enchant that with a Grand Soul Gem to do 17 Fire, 17 Shock, and 16 Frost damage. And that's because if I wanted to do 50 damage of one type, so here I'll say equals 100 divided by 3. The way it calculates your spell cost damage with enchants, if I put 50 shock damage on my weapon, that would cost 116 magicka, and so I wouldn't be able to put that enchant on a weapon. However, if I split it up between my 3 effects, then all of them combined only cost 83, yet that's still doing 50 damage per swing. That means 85 is the max damage you can put, or sorry, the max magicka cost you can put on a custom weapon enchant with a Grand Soul Gem. So this is 83 magicka cost between my 3 damaging effects. That's going to do 50 damage, 50 bonus elemental damage. I also like to carry around a 0-weight Umbra, just because it has a high base weapon damage of 28. And if you are in the middle of the quest, it doesn't weigh anything, which is kind of nice to have your second weapon not weigh anything. So late game, if I'm looking at my damage formula, this is with a 2-handed Madness Claymore, which you can make in the Shivering Isles, max strength, max blade skill, increased durability for my high armorer skill. And if I'm using 4 Fortify Fatigue potions and 2 Fortify Fatigue spells, I will have 393% fatigue. And that means every swing will do 80 physical damage, and a power attack will do a whopping 200 physical damage. Combine that with the elemental damage, even if you run out of charge, you're still able to handily kill your opponents. Just make sure you have some form of restore fatigue going, so you're actually at that maximum fatigue percentage there, because that fortifies your damage quite a bit. So some of the strengths of this build, well, it's got 75% magic resist, and the spell reflect just comes from the Mundane Ring alone. With that reflect damage, you're taking a total of 10% damage. So if I have 400 health, which at high level I would have much more, that would be 4,000 effective health against physical attacks. And magic attacks aren't really a threat either due to that high magic resist and spell reflect. This is the highest health pool possible in the game because you start with 65 endurance, whether you pick Redguard, Nord, or Orc with the warrior sign. I still have 350 total magicka, so that's plenty to be able to cast Fortify Fatigue spells or Restore Fatigue spells or Soul Trap as I need to restore my weapon. With Alchemy as a major skill, it'll be pretty easy to get it to 100 and get lots of Fortify Fatigue potions. And I would plan to get fairly high level in this build because that way you can get the Master Apparatuses. If you didn't know this, with Alchemy, if you are not using Master Apparatuses, the best, if I was using all novices, the best Fortify Fatigue potion I could make is only 56. But if I switch to Master equipment, it goes up to 148 per potion. So going from novice to master alchemy apparatuses is a massive boost to the potions that you can make. The only weaknesses to this build, it does rely on a lot of fortified fatigue, whether that's from potions or spells. Spell effectiveness is only 95% because of your armor that you're wearing. You have a relatively low magical pool compared to my other builds, so you won't be able to do much weakness stacking like you can in the other builds. And big damage requires that weapon charge. 50 bonus damage is huge. Normally you're not going to be fortifying your fatigue so much that you're doing 80 per swing. Without that fortified fatigue, for example, you're only doing 32 per swing, even 80 for a power attack. So getting a bonus 50 elemental damage is massive. And if you could do a weakness spell 100% to each element and magic, that would quadruple that to 200 damage extra per swing just from elemental damage. The sad truth about Oblivion is that physical damage is just never quite as powerful as elemental unless you do some scummy things. You want to watch how to do like 15,000 damage, you can watch my maximum damage video on the topic. Custom class number 3 is going to be the Golem. This is going to be a high elf Atronach, specializing in magic. Again, I don't always pick endurance and strength, but these are going to be very difficult to level still, so I highly recommend both endurance and strength. The important major skills are destruction, alteration, conjuration, and alchemy. Alteration will help with shield spells. Unlike the other builds, which would just use alteration for feather, shield spells are actually relatively expensive. Before you're getting powerful enchants like a 25% fire shield or a 25% shock shield, that shield is required to reach the armor cap just from casting buffs on yourself. Destruction is your main source of damage. Conjuration is pretty useful, but not required. Alchemy is going to be really helpful for this build just because you're going to need so many Restore Magicka potions. I think late game, what happens is you get 100 Magicka and flax seeds, which are all over Skingrad. The top effect of that ingredient is Restore Magicka. So you just run around Skingrad for 20 minutes, make 200, 300 potions. They don't weigh anything, they restore plenty of magicka, and you just always have 2 of those going. The other skills after that don't really matter. I would choose Blade or Blunt just so you can have something for when you run out of magicka that's doing decent damage. Again, that Athletics and Mercantile don't really matter. You could pick Speechcraft, you could pick something else. I would not pick Mysticism, and I'm not using armor on this build. You can, obviously. You've probably seen me use a similar build to this with armor if you've watched my other videos. But in this example, this is my mage that's not using any armor. So my equipment, I have Spell Drinker. This is a reward for a Mage's Guild quest. Make sure you are a high enough level. That way it will give you 26 Spell Absorb. And Sorcerer's Ring, which is a random drop. There are a lot of different places you can do where you get a powerful jewelry piece like Serpent's Wake, or that one Thieves Guild quest where you kill all the blind monks. I believe the final boss always drops one of these. Make sure you're doing them over level 20 because Sorcerer's Ring cannot drop until you are level 20. Then we just have a combination of some shield from our Sigil Stones. You only need 3 of these, and then you could get the last 10% shield from your spells, or you could use 4 if you just want to always be at the armor cap. The rest are going to be plus 50 Magic Sigil Stones. And your weapon doesn't really matter. You could use something with Absorb Magicka. I've seen people do that, but I would just probably use something with a weakness enchant just to get a powerful weakness effect on your enemy before you blow their head off. The end game stats, well, you have full spell absorption, so you are completely immune to magic, and any magic damage dealt to you just restores your Magicka. You're going to be at 85% armor easily. Even if you're only using 3 of these, you'll still be at 85% armor because with Alteration, there's no reason not to cast shield spells. However, without any magic regen, I don't necessarily like having to rely on those as much, so it's not quite as effective. You will have 600 Magicka, so it's still a lot, even though you won't have any regen. This is a little bit easier because you don't have to worry about agility, you don't have to worry about speed, you don't have to worry about willpower. And so it's kind of easy to make sure you're getting strength, intelligence, and endurance up to 100 because your other attributes just aren't very important. Lastly, that 100% spell effectiveness is really nice. If you wanted to switch one of these out for illusion, that would not be a terrible idea as well. I just would be careful not to get too high level with this build. The strengths are, well, without the patch, with Spelldrinker Amulet, it looks like you're wearing the Amulet of Kings. Again, that spell effectiveness. Spell Absorb is really useful. Unlike having Spell Reflect, you're immune to reflected spells. You're immune to traps. And you don't only need plus 50 Magic of Sigil Stones. You could use these Elemental Shields, which are actually pretty common, so a good spread of Sigil Stones. At lower levels, you could be enchanting your gear with Fortified Destruction or Fortified Conjuration, whichever one you're more relying on. The weaknesses of this one, well, being an Astronaut can be annoying. I don't actually ever pick it because I think it is very defensive and it's good, but I get annoyed too easily. I don't want to have to farm flax seeds. I don't want to have to get 100 alchemy or worry about my magicka. Some people really like managing their resources. If you like that type of gameplay, I highly recommend the Golem. Do not pick a Breton Atronach. You do not need that much magic resist early game, and you're getting 100% spell absorption. So that 50% magical resist is completely wasted. Just be a high elf. The weaknesses aren't, there's no downside to the weaknesses. You start with an extra 50 magica boost compared to the Bretons. You run 10% faster. You just want to pick high elf if you're going to be an Atronach. It's definitely the way to go. The last thing I wanted to say is if you're not wearing armor, you have to use your wrist irons for gloves. It's the only non-armor like cloth gloves or wrist irons. You start with one and you get one in Shivering Isles if you have that expansion. Okay, last custom class is the Arcane Archer. This is one of my favorites. If you've watched my builds, I have shown some of these. The Arcane Archer is a high elf with a mage birth sign. I think in the one that I did in my YouTube videos, it was an apprentice. I don't recommend that unless you really like dodging enemy attacks. Objectively better is the mage sign. This is a 150 bonus magicka just from this high elf and mage sign. I would pick the stealth specialization instead of magic because we're trying to get 100 marksmen and we're trying to get high sneak. Now the ones in green here, I'm going to try and get all of these to 100. You still will be getting high restoration and high sneak. Some people will also say, why luck instead of agility? And I want to show with this weapon formula, if you're starting with a weapon, and let's say we have 50 strength and 40 blade and normal weapon durability. This is rounding, but it's saying we do 6 damage. If I choose strength as my favorite attribute, that would give me 5 strength, and I would go up to 7 damage. Here, let's get rid of the round just so we can see the exact. We're going to get rid of the round. So it's 6.56. So we went from 6.4 to 6.56. That was a boost of 0.16 increase. If we chose luck, how that would work is that would be 40% of your increased luck increases all of your skills by an invisible +2. That would act as +2 blade, which would bring us up to 6.64. So luck would increase your damage by, what is that, 6.4 to 6.64, so that's 0.24. So the strength increase damage is 0.16. The luck increase is 0.24. And so it's 50% more damage choosing luck. And as you probably know, luck also increases all of your other skills by +2 invisibly, except for, athletics and acrobatics. And unlike strength, I do pick strength typically because it's a little bit more damage and carry weight. But when you're looking at agility, agility doesn't really do much except for that bow damage. Choosing luck instead, increasing your marksman, does more for you. And it's very typical to max out your agility before you max out your marksman. After you've maxed out your agility, obviously that favorite attribute isn't helping you, where if you've maxed out your agility and you pick luck, that's still increasing your damage. So this luck is better, I think, than choosing agility in almost every single way. So early game, typically, as with every build, we're training block or heavy armor, something to make sure we're getting our endurance up. And then later on, we would switch to destruction. You could train marksman, but I think it'd be better to use Fortify Marksman effects on your gear or to just let it level naturally. A stealth specialization combined with marksman is a pretty massive increase to how much experience you're gaining per shot. If you're curious about that interaction, you can watch any of my skills deep dives, and I always talk about the experience required and how that's a 20/9 multiplier, choosing both a specialization and a major skill. So marksman will go up fast enough. Late game build, well, I think the Necromancer's Amulet is just too good, especially here. You're not relying on strength. You don't need as much carry weight because you're wearing light armor. Mundane Ring is going to give you that big magic defense. 25% fire shield or shock shield or frost shield. This isn't really required because technically in the best gear, you will be at the armor cap, but this way light armor actually gets damaged quickly. This will get to the armor cap faster, and if your gear is damaged, you will still be at the armor cap with that 25% bonus. The Diadem of Euphoria is really good. That is in the Shivering Isles. Savior's Hide is from a Daedric quest. It's very easy to get from her scene. And then you could do any combination of Fatigue and Magicka Sigil Stones. I would probably do 2 of each. That way you don't have to save scum quite as much. My weapon, I would do a Perfect Amber Bow enchanted with 7 damage of each type for 3 seconds. And if you look at spell cost here, we go back to this one. If we do 7 damage of each type for 3 seconds, that only costs 82. So with the Grand Soul Gem, you'd still have a lot of uses because it's 82 Magicka. Grand Soul Gem has 1600 Magicka within it. So you're only doing 82. The cap is 85. And per shot, that is 63 damage. The only downside to this is you have to wait the full 3 seconds or you're wasting damage. But because you're an arcane archer, you have a lot of Magicka. And you can interweave in soul traps, self buffs, or weakness spells, or just simply damage spells as well. You have a lot of Magicka. The Marksman and the Sneak is just really for that first shot, getting that big 63 dot on them. If they don't die from that, you can hit them with another one. Perfect Amber or Perfect Madness, bows and arrows are the best, but Daedric would be just fine. If you're curious about the exact damage of that, the bow formula is a little bit different. With the base, this is with the Perfect Amber arrow and bow. If you have 100 agility, 100 marksman, perfect weapon durability, meaning you have 75 armor. Oh, this was from my max damage video. Ignore that. You'd be doing 42 damage. So your sneak attack would be 126 physical plus that 63 elemental. Unlike a warrior, you're not going to be using a lot of fatigue. So if you're able to fortify your fatigue, and remember with the Necromancer's Amulet, you have 25 less strength and 25 less endurance, you could pretty easily get up to 200 fatigue, which would be a 50% damage increase to your physical damage. If you cast a couple spells, drink a few potions, and really bump it up, there's no reason you couldn't get to 300% and do 250 physical damage with your sneak attack right at the beginning, which is massive. That can one-shot certain enemies. And bows are immune to reflect damage. You don't have to worry about that problem because reflect damage can be a big problem with a very heavy physical damage build with melee. So some endgame stats, we're going to be at the armor cap. We're going to have 95% magic resist, a massive 648 Magicka pool. This is huge for a non-pure mage build. It's very easy to boost your fatigue. It's a cheap spell. It only has a 0.04 base cost. If you have restoration, even not at 100, you haven't maxed it out. It doesn't matter. As long as it's not like 10, it still will not be a very expensive spell. You can cast lots of plus 95 fatigue spells for 2 minutes. In fact, you can add them on to other spells. Any soul trap that you cast, you can just buff your fatigue 95 with it. Any weakness spell you cast, have it buff your fatigue. You can even throw on restore fatigues that last a long time. You could drink restore fatigue potions. Those are very easy to make. If you do a weakness shot, you can quadruple that 63 enchant from your damage as well if you include every single weakness on it. And with this big Magicka pool, there's no reason you couldn't do that. So it's got insane weapon damage, high physical damage, high elemental damage. It's also a very fast character. I think people don't quite realize a high elf has a 10% movement speed increase. These skills, if you jump around wearing light armor and running, well, those are the skills that govern in speed. You'll be able to gain a lot of speed each level. Unlike most of these other builds, it'll be a little trickier to gain speed. This one can actually gain a lot of speed, and with athletics as a major skill, you're going to be running very fast, unlike a lot of other builds. And with light armor, you don't need as much feather to make all that weight go away. And bows don't weigh very much, so it takes very little feather to have no encumbrance whatsoever. Most items are guaranteed. This is a Daedric quest item. This is a quest item. Mundane Ring I've talked about. Necromancer's Amulet is a quest item. And we have some variety for our sigil stones. It's not all plus 50 Magicka that we're relying on. In fact, if you don't get them very early, you still have a high Magicka pool from your race and birth sign. So it requires very little gear to be powerful. You just need a Grand Soul Gem, and you can make that custom enchant. Something I don't like about this build is you actually want to increase all your attributes. That's kind of annoying. A lot of these you only need strength, endurance, and intelligence, maybe willpower. This one, every attribute is actually improving your character, and so you want to get them all to 100. You still don't need to efficiently level, but you might want to make sure you're getting +3s and +5s more frequently with this build, where with most other builds I do, it doesn't matter at all. I actually like having a high speed, high strength, high agility, high willpower, high intelligence on this character, specifically the Arcane Archer. Okay. The last build we have, this is called the Todd Howard, sometimes called the God Howard. The race is a Wood Elf. The burst sign is the Shadow. It has to be a stealth specialization. The attributes are willpower and luck. Here's our list of majors. Hand to hand, because he's a scrappy bastard. Mysticism, because, well, we don't know how he does what he does. Mercantile, speechcraft for obvious reasons.
I read on the internet that our games have had a few bugs. I did. I read it on the internet, so it's true. And that sometimes it doesn't just work.
Security, because he's going to break into your house and, never mind. Sneak, well, you know, he's a sneaky little guy. And acrobatics, I've once heard that he jumped 25 feet onto a building and killed a man. Weaknesses, well, it's short, very short. In fact, it's far too short to win. It is actually impossible to beat the game as a Wood Elf, and only Todd Howard has ever been witnessed beating Oblivion as a Wood Elf. So thanks for watching my video. Hope you enjoyed.
The kids in the block would say, you know, I'm going to play quarterback for the Cowboys, and I'd be like, I'm going to make video games, and everyone's going to play them. Like, you dork. Go back to the chess club. Who's laughing now?